Chris Graham joins me this week to discuss beer brewing equipment types. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 333. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 333, and it's early October 2025. Chris Graham joins me this week to discuss beer brewing equipment types. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. Now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome Chris Graham. Chris is the president of More Beer and has been brewing for over 25 years. Chris has taught at the Seibel Institute and is a former board member on the Brewers Association Board, as well as the American Homebrewers Association Governing Council. Chris, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I love that our intro is getting a little old, because I'll just go with I've only been brewing 25 years. That sounds perfect.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's probably been more than 25 years now, right?
I say we can stick with that. I'm in my early 30s. We're good.
That's good, yeah. I haven't done the math yet, but I think not too many years, it'll be 40. So 40 years since I brewed.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Anyways, it's great to have you back on the show. What have you been up to the last year? I know you guys have been very busy at More Beer.
Well, I'm getting a lot more gray hair, as you can see, and that's because we're working like crazy. The homebrew industry's been a little rocky, a little hard. So we're doing our best to make everything fit so that we can weather the storm. And we know it'll pick back up again eventually, and we're just trying to be as rock solid as possible. We, kind of consolidated warehouses, which in the long run will help, but in the short run is a ton of work. So doing lots of visits to it. It's actually running quite well now relative to the first 6 months or so. So that's going well. And then we're trying to do some basic innovations inside of homebrewing, working with different vendors who still are trying to bring a lot of stuff from the pros to homebrewing, abstract hops, things like that really are make things fun, kind of gives us as homebrewers new tools and new toys to play with. So lots of little things, nothing major right now.
Yeah, I've done a couple episodes on the new hop products, and they are very interesting. I mean, it gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to apply the right aromas, the right flavors whenever you want, really.
Yeah, and some of them are super stable, and that's cool. And it's really just, I don't know, I use some of them after I serve. So I can actually give a little bit extra hop in one beer, especially for my friends who are hop heads. They love that. I'll turn what I love is a pale ale, but once in a while, I'll just add some extra hops, and they call it a light IPA, and it's perfect.
Yeah, it is cool how you can adjust your beer after it's done now, which is kind of neat.
Exactly. I mean, like literally in the pour.
Well, today you wanted to talk about various brewing equipment types, and I think back in 309 we talked about flash brewing, which is perhaps a good place to start, right? Flash brewing, of course, is a no-boil method for brewers who want to make their own beer with kind of minimum time and fuss. Can you give us an overview again of flash brewing and what equipment's involved? Because it's a fairly new innovation, right?
Exactly. And to be honest, some of the hop changes was one of the biggest things that really allowed us to push this product out where we feel confident in it. Being that, because you're not doing a boil, you're not even doing a heating process. So we really needed stuff that was going to perform every single time. And the way we engineered this was we looked at where's everywhere that we've watched beginning brewers screw up the whole time, and said, how do we eliminate this process to see if we can make a good product, but not have all these risks. Um, and that's kind of the goal of it. Minimum time, minimum exposure, minimum chance of picking up a lot of bacteria, trying to minimize oxygen pickup, working with yeast strains that are really robust, temperature wise, really quick, hot, quick dropping of the acid level to really make you safe quicker. So that your chances of bacteria, your chances of oxygen, your chances of fermenting too warm, those all they haven't been fully eliminated, but they've been reduced so far that we are getting tons of people telling us all the time, like, my God, I made a beer 28 years ago, and I just made my first beer since doing it this way, and this came out so much better and so much easier. And we're doing kits now, Brad, that are so simple. We're trying to just dumb it so far down, and I don't mean dumb it down in terms of it's stupid. It's just in the TikTok generation, we got to make things fast and easy, all the way to you don't even need a bottle capper anymore. We're using these PET plastic bottles. You just put the cap on and you're done. And plastics are really cool from that perspective of you can bring it out camping, you can bring it to the beach, you can bring it to a pool. You're not worrying about glass breaking. Cans are awesome, but then you need a steamer, and that's not easy. So, so really, you just need a fermenter. You you put them into these bottles through a spigot on the bottom. You put carbonation drops in them. You seal it off, and that's like all you really need. So it's
So, I mean, with flash brewing, you're really just taking the ingredients and putting them in, I don't know, a bucket or something similar, right?
Yeah, we do like those clear carboys that are plastic that have the big openings, so it's nice and easy to
Sure.
put stuff in. We don't even have you mixing them because at first we were mixing them, and like because we are homebrewers and everything must be mixed up perfectly. And then we tried it a few times, like let's try not doing this. Let's see what happens. And it's like, ooh, there's an elimination of somebody taking this foreign object that they may not have sanitized well, putting it in there, potentially in a high bacteria environment, putting all that bacteria in there by pulling the air in through a vortex as they stir,
Sure.
all that. We just eliminated that and it worked. Um, I'm kind of a fan of the order I put things in, so it kind of mixes on its own. Like, meaning I put in some water, then I put in my malt mix, and the hops, and then I add more water before I add my yeast, so that way the water that I'm adding stirs it a little bit.
Sure.
But you don't have to.
I would
So that
imagine the yeast action probably mixes things up pretty well once it
oh,
gets going,
once
right?
fermentation starts, which usually starts within 8 hours, that's our goal with those particular yeast strains that we're working with, and we've worked with 4 different labs on really isolating down like these yeast strains that are quick starts and quick lowering of pH. To really make sure those do well. And then what's funny is, so we designed this for like the new brewer, right? With the hopes
Sure.
that we can get, and now we're doing 2 gallon sizes again, with the hopes of simpler, faster, smaller price to get in. We actually are just releasing a kegging kit that works around SodaStream CO2 tanks, and they're
Nice.
plastic kegs. So under $100, you're kegging and easy. Um, so we're trying
So,
to go after a new generation of brewer. That's kind of our goal with it.
yeah, I mean, and all you
However,
need sounds like all you need to get started is one of these plastic carboy or equivalent,
yeah,
and some way to bottle it, I guess, right?
exactly. We sell them as kits. They can buy them independent, but we sell them as kits. We're really not catering to the I'm going to go to the hardware store, buy my stuff there, and put this all together. Because
Sure.
really, the kits we don't sell the individual ingredients because they're really designed to work together. And if they're not
Yeah.
done together, we haven't tested that they'll work because we have tested plenty of ways that don't work,
Yeah.
plenty of combinations of things that don't work. So these are the ones that work well, the ones we sell. And then the funny thing that's kind of come out of this is the experienced brewers talking to us about it because they're kind of cheat codes in terms of, okay, I'm going to brew my all grain batch. let's say I'm making an IPA, or actually for me, I'm going to make a lager. If I'm doing a full brew
Sure,
day and I really want those beautiful flavors, that beautiful malt, and control my temperatures perfectly and all that. Well, while I'm sitting around, I mean, how much are you sitting around in a brew day, right? And you're already cleaning, you already have your stuff. I'm now hammering out a basic pale ale or an IPA or something in 10 minutes of time or so. And I just put that to the side and let that ferment. So it's like I'm using it more as like and others are telling us as a time cheat. I just don't have the time to
sure.
do this, or I'm going to have a party coming up and I just want to have some homebrew. In fact, my wife has a Halloween party coming up, and so I need to brew one for this. And I figured I'll just do it one night in 10,
Man,
15
you better
minutes.
better
And
get busy.
10, 15 minutes, Brad. And then it'll
Yeah,
take me
yeah,
longer to keg it, right?
yeah.
Probably, than it will to actually make it. So it's just sneaking in these batches for us people who can brew, but sometimes we don't. And then it's either no beer or something that's pretty darn good tasting, yet we all know it didn't quite take the same effort.
Sure, sure. Well, moving on from flash brewing, we also have extract brewing, which was dominated home brewing up until the early 2000s. Um, so let's talk a little bit about extract brewing. What's kind of the minimum equipment you need, and how what's the process look like?
You know, I still think it's a great way to go. At some point in your career, if you're getting into home brewing, I still think it's the best place to start if you really know you want to go the whole distance because you're crawling, you're learning all these things that Flash takes away from you. So people who love Flash, we're encouraging to go to this. So kettle, number one thing you're going to need, and I'm a big believer in 25% bigger than your batch size. That's my minimum kettle. Yes, you can go smaller and do a concentrated boil and top up with water. But if you can do a bigger kettle, but that's a slippery slope. Is let's say it's a 5 gallon batch, you have a 7.5 gallon kettle. Now you're probably going to need a wort filler. Oh, now you're probably going to need an outdoor cooker. So it's a little
Yeah,
bit
you
of a
need a
slippery
burner,
slope
right?
there.
It's very hard to boil 5 gallons on a regular stove, at least most standard stoves, right?
But you and I know like that diluted boil is so much better tasting than the concentrated boil. At least I know that. And I'm sure you do too. It's just a better flavor. But you need a kettle. If it's going to be bigger, you need those other two things I just mentioned. You're going to need little tiny things, a spoon and such. But then you're going to need a way to get that to a fermenter.
Sure.
Glass carboy, plastic bucket. As long as it's food grade, you're good. Ideally, cleanable and sanitizable is huge. Airlock and stopper of some sort to keep out things, letting out the CO2, but keeping bacteria, bugs,
The
and
bugs
whatnot
from
from
getting in,
getting
yeah.
in there. Um, then you'll need packaging, whether that be bottles, kegs. I tell a lot of people who are brand new to the hobby, swing tops are actually a pretty good way to go if you don't want to deal with a whole bunch of other things. You just get carbonation drops and bottles and see how you like it. And then if you love that, you might want a bottling bucket, a bottling wand. And if you love that, you're going to want a keg. So it's the slippery slope of
Of
fun,
course.
like any
Yeah.
other
Then you
hobby.
need a keg
But
fridge.
but the bare minimums to get into extract are those things. I'm sure I missed a few things that make life better, like a hop bag for putting your hops in and taking them out during the bath.
Sure, but I mean, the
Measuring it.
point is, I mean, you can still get into it fairly cheaply, fairly inexpensively with plastic equipment and a nice pot, for example, and you can start brewing your own beer at home, and it gives you the nice thing about extract gives you a lot of flexibility. You can design your own recipes. You can actually get pretty
Yep,
sophisticated. You brew almost any style. Yeah.
that's
Um,
exactly it.
so pretty cool. Um, well, I know some serious brewers even make extract batches now because they do take a lot less time, and probably the same thing with flash brewing. Um, what are some of the advantages of being able to just, especially make small batches on your stovetop?
It's the shortcut of time. When you're gonna do all grain, you're generally gonna have a longer brew day, and it's the extraction of malt from the grain has been done for you. So you really get to save that time. That's your number one thing because once you're in the boil, you're doing the same thing either way. So it's really
Yeah,
you cut off that time beforehand. Now, one tip, and it's a huge tip, especially for people who haven't used it before. Liquid extract's great, especially if it's fresh, but dry malt extract never goes bad because it doesn't go through a Maillard reaction. So it costs more, but if you're doing extract batches and you, especially light colored beers,
sure.
doing it with the DME is just a really easy way to do extract batches.
Yeah, and it does last a very long time, which is nice too. The other thing you mentioned, I didn't write this in the notes, but 2 gallon batches, 3 gallon batches are becoming much more popular than they were a few years ago. It used to be that the minimum we would do is 5 gallons or about 19 liters, but now a lot of people are brewing quite a bit less than that.
It was bigger is better, right? Like,
Yeah,
especially for all grain brewers, it's like, well, if I'm going to do 5 gallons, it takes almost no more time to do 10. And
and
then
then
we start making
15, and
20
yeah.
gallon systems. Yeah. And it's like, to what level are you now a commercial brewery?
Well, I do think the small batches have become much more accessible for people that
I,
don't have a
uh,
lot of
uh,
time.
I
Yeah,
100% agree. I don't even know
yeah,
if it's even just time. I think some of it's just, I love to brew for the unique flavors you can produce, but I don't need 5 gallons of it typically. I give
sure.
away more beer than I consume myself. I got to be careful. If I drink too much beer, slippery
Yeah.
slope. So I end up giving away way more beer than I probably drank, or dumping it down the drain so that my keg's empty for the next one that I brewed.
And
But
I've
I
noticed
think,
post COVID, people aren't drinking like they used to. We aren't having a lot of the big parties like we used to, and so on.
do we need a
Gatherings.
whole show on that? Because that's its own
Yeah,
world. But,
almost. Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I
moving
blame my
on.
kids'
Go
generation.
ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
Moving
I
on to
go.
the moving on to the next level. Obviously, we have all grain brewing, which adds at least another hour or two to the process. Um, I think the fastest I've ever done it is maybe 3.5 hours. Because you have to mash the grains, you have to complete the starch conversion, then you go into the regular boil just like you would with an extract batch. Um, but we have some really nice equipment now available. A lot of these all-in-one systems are just amazing. They're attractively priced, and we did talk about quite a few of these back in episode 224. But can you give us an overview of these sort of entry-level all-grain systems?
Yeah, now these have come a long way too. They started as essentially modified coffee urns for commercial environments. That's
Sure.
essentially what they were, and they looked like it, right? They just, they had the black spigot just like you would in a big church environment or whatnot. And now they got so popular they were able to make their own molds and really customize them. And the people out there making them really did a good job. Uh, Blickman's crew, some of the Anvil Foundry, that is an amazing product. The Brazilla is an awesome product. Uh, you know, I think almost all the major ones ended up making them. The Grainfather is the OG. It's the father of
Sure.
all of this, and they make, arguably they make one of the most advanced cool ones. It's expensive. They also make lower end ones too that are very affordable. But the whole kind of concept is they're small, they're self-contained. They are all electric as far as I know. I don't know any that aren't electric. And it's kind of like for me, if I'm not doing flash, when I brew all grain nowadays, I do it on one of these systems because it's so nice. It
Sure.
it nests in itself. It's one vessel. When I'm done, it fits anywhere in my garage or my storage area. Um, I just plug it in. It's got a controller built in and all these little gizmos and gadgets that I sometimes use and sometimes don't, but it's just easy. Now and they make good beer. Would I say
Sure.
you could do a triple decoction Bohemian Pilsner? No. But can you make a really nice beer on it? Absolutely. And like everything in this hobby, you can, you can do these sub things like your water treatments and stuff to make it a better beer. But I would say the one thing is cons is they are electric, and depending on what size element you have to how powerful they are, how much boil you can get out of them. Especially a lot of the times they they compromise here in the States to make them 110 because obviously we
Sure.
have that everywhere. They do make 220 versions, but a lot of people like the 110 from the concept of, well, we have that everywhere and it's easy to plug into. Um, but sometimes 110 is hard to get that 5 gallon boil really rolling
That is that
well.
is a challenge. Yeah, it's kind of right on the edge most of the time.
Yeah, and
So
the other thing to me that makes them a little more challenging to make the greatest beer possible is their height to width ratio. They are tall and skinny. They are not, proportionally sized of width to height ratios.
sure.
So if you go look at a brewery, you look at the brew deck, you'll be like, whoa, those are a lot wider, shallower than, especially in the mash tun, than we're doing tall and skinny. And there's reasons big breweries do a wide, shallow mash, especially for efficiency. So there are going to be compromises, but for the money, they're fantastic.
Now these are most of these are effectively brew in a bag systems with a stainless, basket or something. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of a brew in a bag style system?
Yeah, no, we actually call these BIABs because
Yeah,
they're just
yeah,
electronic and they're stainless and blah
same
blah
thing.
blah. But brew in a bag is such an awesome way for that extract brewer to try all grain without the huge investment. I mean, what a great way to do it. Essentially, you do need that bigger kettle. You can't do this in the smaller kettle, but you're going to use a big nylon bag. You're going to do all your grains in there. You're going to heat the water in the kettle beforehand, dunk it down in there, let it mash. You can even open your bag and stir and all that good jazz. Then pull that bag out, let it drip. You can even rinse. And then now you have your kettle with the sweet wort in it that you can boil with your hops and clarifying agents and all that. So it really is all grain. The complications is it's hard to be it's hard to go bigger. Lifting out that big thing of grain is
Yeah,
already hard. You can already burn yourself. I've seen people build block and tackle rigs to help take it
yeah. I mean,
out. And
most of these systems are 5 gallons or 19 liters
yeah,
or below,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
there's only a handful that are larger than that. Like you said, many of them have tackle systems to lift the basket. Actually,
Yeah, but even in the nylon bag one, and then for anyone who's listening to this, maybe you've done some extract batches, love it, want to try all grain, but don't want to invest yet. This just bag, BIAB concept is so simple, and I think John Palmer does probably. You have some great articles on
yeah,
BeerSmith, and then John Palmer's got some great ones in his book. Just such a delightful, easy way, low cost for people to try it.
sure. Well, some of these all-in-one systems even have advanced features like pumps and temperature control and all these other things. How do these help out the brewer?
Uh, Consistency. That's where I will say is the ability to be consistent. Sometimes they're going to hurt the brewer because if they haven't studied it enough or used it enough and they do use it wrong, it actually doesn't help them at all. I've taken those phone calls. But once you get used to it, like anything else, you can become much more consistent. I don't care about your efficiency nearly as much as your consistency, especially in things like how much malt or sugars are you extracting out of your batch, what percentage that is. I could care less if it's 60% or 80%. I just want it to be relatively the same when you're in the same gravity zone so that you're not just all over the board and you have no way to plan for future batches. So I think especially pumps allow for that. Temp control is nice because even if it's not accurate, because this is something funny I argued with a friend the other day. I don't even care how accurate, because sometimes unless you calibrate them, they can go off accuracy. But if
Sure,
you're always wrong the same amount, like if a watch is always wrong the same amount, it's at least dependable and you can use it. But if it's not, then it's hard to use. But as long as it's consistent, and so that's I think what these do. They also make it so you don't have to lift so much, especially pumping. When you can pump, you no longer have to rely solely on gravity. So whatever function that is you're doing, being able to just pump it out of there means my very first all-in-one didn't have a pump. And when I went to go into the carboy, I realized I had to lift this hot thing of liquid, tall and skinny. So I had to lift it even higher than I'm used to onto a crate that was higher than where the fermenter was. I'm like, well,
Of
that's not
course.
very pleasant. I would like to pump that next
Well, and
time.
the pumps also let you recirculate as well, right, during the
Sure,
mash
sure.
and kind of maintain temperature in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
Consistency. Yeah,
Exactly. All going for that elusive consistency, which
yeah,
will bump up your efficiency.
sure. And then moving up from this, of course, we have the traditional sort of three vessel system is kind of the standard, right?
Yep.
What are the three vessels used for?
So we have our boil kettle. I think anyone who's brewed a beer should know what that is, and used for exactly that, the boil. Getting your hop extraction and you know, uh, sanitizing and all those things that happen in the boil. Then you have a mash tun, and that is where your grain goes. Usually, you have a typical false bottom, and then the grain goes on top of that, and you put your grains in there. You know, let's say 1.1 to 1.3 quarts of water per pound of grain, holding them at temperatures for your saccharification, and then rinsing. That's what the false bottom's for, allowing the liquid to flow through and drain out to the boil kettle, so that you get the sugar away from the grain. And then typically you are adding hot water onto the top of that via the last vessel, which is the hot liquor tank. And
Smart, yeah.
yeah, that name always threw me off. I think it's a British term. Hot liquor is just one of those weird words that we've all just said for how many years, but never really thought about the meaning of it.
Hmm. And of course, as we get to the larger systems, you almost always have to have pumps, temperature control, those kinds of things, because a lot of these vessels aren't insulated. It's almost impossible to lift them. When you get up to say 10 gallons, for example. Um, so what do these do for you?
So, one, you're brewing bigger batches. Two, they're almost always stainless. They're hardly ever. Sometimes you might have a mix, you might have a mash tun that is an insulated something, but for the most part, the goal is you're doing large batches. Most of these are industrial made. They're made to last a lifetime. They're not
Sure.
kind of chintzy. They're usually running propane, maybe natural gas, something big flames, open flames. So the whole thing has to be built stout and solid. But then the pumps and if it has a brain with the things to handle signals from temperature controllers, those are great. Now all of a sudden you can keep your mash at the temp you want, and you can keep your liquid level. We use float switches to keep your liquid level above
Grain
the
bed.
grain bed in a fly sparge. We use float switches to make sure we have liquid in our hot liquor tank before we turn a burner on. We use the temp sensor to know that it's below the temp we wanted it at, so we turn the burner on and off based off of that. Um, so yeah, these little tricks with pumps and temp controllers and things that are reading them um, just allow consistency again. It's a bigger form of it. You might be moving liquid since you have three vessels. Now those pumps are huge to allow you to move from vessel to vessel without it necessarily having to be a big gravity tree, which were popular for a long time. But it's a little unnerving to have your hot liquor tank 4 to 5 feet above your head at 172 degrees.
Right. Yeah, I remember those systems. Um, Well, now there are two types of systems that are popularly used to control the temperature. One's called a rim system, one's called a Herm system. And in this case, I think in most cases we're talking about the mash. Can you tell us a little bit about how those systems work
Yeah, yeah. So
and what's the
rims,
difference?
yeah, I'll go through them real quick. They're very similar. The idea is you're going to take liquid from under the false bottom of the mash tun, you're pumping it out, and you're going to heat that liquid up, and then you're going to reintroduce it to the top of the mash tun. So it's a closed loop you're doing in the mash tun with the idea of heating the liquid in line. Um, I've never actually seen someone do it with flame. So we'll take that one out, but and just talk about rims versus herms. Both of
Sure.
those are are basically you're using a pump to move the liquid. You are in a rim system going through a vessel that you have a heating element in. And
Hmm.
so you are heating that liquid up in line and reintroducing it to the top of the mash again.
Sure.
Anytime you're using a heating element, some people have concerns of scorching, overheating. So it's hard to say I can truly control it from getting too hot in there in a small vessel with a heater in it. Now, some of these people, manufacturers, have done a great job of eliminating those fears. Blitman has a hop rocket, or a Herms rims rocket that is probably one of the best at it, and others probably do it well too. But I'd say he has the nod to controlling that temperature as you're um, recirculating it, not worrying about, oh my God, I just brought it to 212 and now I'm introducing 212 and I'm going to have this super hot top of my mash tun. And as it goes through, eventually when it gets to that thermal probe, it's going to go way past the temperature I want it.
Sure.
Because most of us can't afford a mash mixer. That would be super cool, but most of us don't have it. We're just relying
Yeah.
on the liquid recirculating to eventually bring the heater on. Terms, on the other hand, is instead of having this vessel, we're utilizing the heat of the hot liquor tank. We're putting a heat exchanger in there, and we're running the from the mash tun liquid through this coil sitting in the hot water bath. That exchanges the heat and brings it over back into the mash tun again. And the nice thing about that is it can never get hotter than what you have your hot liquor tank at.
Right.
So instead of an element, you now just have your hot water. Pros and cons. Your delta T is very small. So, well, depending on what temp you have your hot liquor
Sure.
at. So if you're trying to do a mash out using this, it's a little harder to do that
Yeah,
because
you got to drive the
otherwise
temperature.
you got to drive the temperature up. But then guess what? When you go to spar, you got to lower that temperature. So there is some pros and cons to doing this with that way. Now, doing a standard beta amylase socket, let's say 145 and then saccharification at 152. Those are really easy to do during herms.
Sure.
Doing the mash out, like I said, is a little more challenging. But at that point, you've done a lot of recirculation, so you've gained a super clear wort. So some people don't worry about the mash out as much when doing all that,
Yeah, I
rather
mean, the
than
mash out really isn't all that important unless, except for viscosity primarily, really now, you
yeah.
know. And so if you're worried about a very thick mash, for example, something that has a lot of adjuncts, you might want to do a mash out. Otherwise, you probably don't need it.
Exactly. So whatever someone chooses, it's really about your hardware setup, and
Sure.
both can make good beer. Both are fun to play with. And I'd say Herms is slower but gentler. Rims is effectively more powerful, and you can really adjust those temps quickly, but you run that risk of overheating.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to spend a minute talking about pumps, and I think it's sort of the traditional brewing pump, at least at the homebrew level, is kind of the March pump. But in the last few years, we've seen some new pumps introduced that are quite a bit more sophisticated than that, even at the homebrew level. And of course, you can size up from there to commercial size pumps. But I wanted to get your words on pumps and some of the features to look for.
Yeah, no, we're still dealing mostly with homebrewers. We're dealing with a magnetically coupled spinning head that is essentially accelerating the liquid through it to dumb it down
Sure.
because of the cost. I would love, and we've actually worked many times on prototypes, and I know my competitors have too, and all those names you just mentioned have too, of working on peristaltic pumps. That would be the ultimate because they're
Sure.
self-priming. They, have less moving parts in reality that touch the liquid. But most of us are dealing with a spinny head inside of a thing that the liquid comes in, and you're trying to keep it from cavitating, and then you're accelerating, throwing the liquid out.
And of course, you have to clean it.
Yeah. So, you talked about the March, and then Chugger basically, in my opinion, copied the March, but actually did a really good job and maybe innovated a little bit on top of that in terms of the fittings and the stainless heads and whatnot. So you have the Chugger March, which are very similar pumps.
Hmm.
Um, then moving up the scale, you have the Kegland NK series, which are somewhat similar to the Chugger Marches, and then they
Yeah.
kind of also span up to what the next one and some, in my opinion, one of the top ones is the Blickman Riptide. It's just such
Yeah.
a
The
great
Blickman.
pump.
I
Yeah,
actually have I have a Blickman Riptide, and I love it.
it's so easy.
Now, what?
You mentioned
Talk for a minute though. Why the Riptide's so much nicer?
I will say in three notes, I think. And you mentioned the first one, cleaning. It's got a nice, easy way to take the head off. You don't have to take all the screws out and this kind of stuff. So cleaning becomes way easier. It's got a way, and I mentioned cavitation. That is one thing with this style of pump you run into. It's got a beautiful little bleed port right built into a pressure relief valve. So you can use that
So
all
I
the
mean,
way to get
these
to
pumps have to
liquid.
be primed. It also makes it very easy to prime it, for example.
Exactly. And even worse, when you're pumping hot liquid, you're knocking a lot of the gases out. So not only does it have to be primed to even start, but then periodically you might have to burp it to get rid of some of the air that has been coming out of
Sure.
liquid through it. And then the last thing it has is a nice little way to slow down the flow. So it's got kind of got it all built into one pump. And Keglin's done a nice job of mimicking that. I still
Sure.
think the Riptide's the gold standard,
Yeah.
but budget wise, maybe the MK series has some advantage budget wise. But again, you nailed it in that you have one and you love it, and I can
Yeah.
understand
Yeah.
a
They're
hundred
very
percent
nice. Yeah.
why. Yeah, and that's
I think
that's
I have.
those are the
I think I have one
major
of
pumps.
John's early prototypes, actually. But
Nice, nice, and
anyways,
those are
go
the
ahead.
main pumps. There are other pumps you can use. I
Sure.
On the hot side, I don't recommend it. FlexiVane and things like that that are self priming and whatnot, but they're delicate. They break. They can't handle any solids.
Sure.
So I think for general purposes, those are the three types of pumps homebrewers want to look for.
Right. Now, as we move up to larger three vessel systems, we end up very close, entering into the pseudo commercial brewing system range, really. Um, what additional features do you start to see when you go from home to commercial sizes?
Automations is the first thing I can think of. So a helping hand, whether that's keep me at the right temperature or keep me up the morning or the night or hours before I'm even going to get to work, so that a commercial brewer is not sitting around waiting for his mash water to get hot.
Sure.
Um, then when you are in those, you'll keep my mash where I want it via a pump and recirculation and Herms or rims type situation. They might even use flame in that size. Float switches, keep my liquid levels the way I want them, temp sensors, controllers, controlling time, notifying you when you need to do things, integrating to software. I wonder how that would work.
Yeah.
Um, those are the types of innovations that kind of make most commercial brewer systems work long run for breweries. Most very small breweries start with nothing more complicated than most home brewers use. In fact, sometimes a lot less complicated. Um, and
Yeah. I
then
mean,
over
I've
time,
visited some really small breweries that are, literally just have maybe a one barrel Blickman system or something. It literally looks like a three vessel system I would have in my garage.
some of these don't even have brains. They don't have, they're just three vessels or two vessels, and the guy is just, or gal's there with, looking at the thermometers and making
Moving everything by
adjustments.
hand. Yeah.
And I think that lasts a little bit until they say, oh, I've had to do other things. Oh, I have to make sales calls. I have to do accounting. I have to fill out all the paperwork for, my licensing. And I
Or if
think
you're successful and you're making three batches a day, right? That starts to get old.
or you're hiring people and you're like, I just need this to run properly. I just need this to be consistent so we can make the same beer over and over again rather than getting Bob's version of pale ale versus my version of pale ale.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I wanted to cover, we didn't cover fermenters in detail, but you have a wide variety of options here. Everything from a simple plastic bucket up to a glass cowboy or carboy, I'm sorry, and then
No.
more sophisticated stainless systems or even conical fermenters now at the homebrew level. Can you talk about some of the basic options?
Yeah, let's start with plastic. It's the easiest. And that is, anything that's food grade plastic, which it should have a symbol on it, can be used for fermentation. I think my very first fermentation vessel was probably a trash can that happened to have that little stamp on the bottom. So the homebrew shop that I started out of sold it with that. But cheap, 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 cheap. Easy. The hardest part is actually getting a lid that seals with those typically.
Yeah,
So in the plastic world, the next step up is the onset of people making clear see-through plastic that mimics the carboy, which is cool.
sure,
In fact, they do PET. They do these, ones that oxygen doesn't come through. They don't break. They have a lot of good advantages. But then all of a sudden they started making them with bigger necks on them, bigger openings, and all of a sudden that's a huge advantage. Easy to clean. You can, drill a hole and put a spigot on the side. So plastics come a long way. And the last thing I will say is, then people got into blow molding them into conicals. And so
sure.
the Firmzilla and others out there that are clear, easy to clean, but you get the benefit of the conical shapes. They even have triclover fittings, injected into them, so easy to do. So that's plastic. Now the great thing about plastic is it's generally inexpensive. It's generally strong. It generally doesn't shatter. Those are all great things, but it generally doesn't last. It can scratch easier sometimes, depending on which material it is. But even the best won't be able to hold pressure for long periods of time. Like those conicals I talked about, the Fromzillas, they have a shelf life. They have a stamp on there of um, how long you can use it where you can hold pressure. Otherwise, they can't guarantee it after a certain amount of time. So
Sure.
I would say plastic is the society we're in now. It's disposable.
Yeah.
Hopefully recycle. They are recyclable, but I wonder how much they're truly being recycled over time.
Yeah.
Moving along, glass. Glass is the OG. Glass is like the old king of homebrewing. Glass carboys were a dime a dozen in the 80s and 90s and 2000s. They're inexpensive. They do break, but they don't let oxygen in except for whatever maybe you're putting on top of it. They're clear. So then they're generally a decent price. They're heavy to ship. They break in transit, so it's a little harder sometimes if you don't have a local homebrew shop to go pick them up in. They might break in your basement with 5 gallons of wort in it, and man, that sucks to clean up. Especially when it's actually fully converted to beer and then it breaks because you've done all that work.
Yeah.
Um, but glass carboys is pretty much glass. Stainless, um, that's what we always saw the breweries using, right? Like that was like the gold standard, inert. You can weld it. It looks beautiful. It looks professional. Lasts forever if done right. And it's stainless itself. And Brad, you're a nice generation of doing this. I'm 30 years of more beer, let alone homebrewing before that.
Yeah.
In the beginning, it was like stainless was unheard of for a fermenter.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle where us and Blickman started making conicals somewhere in the late 90s, and it's like, whoa, what's happening here? These are cool. And then all of a sudden, there was a whole revolution, especially SS really did it with the brew bucket where they
Sure.
made this little thing for so inexpensive. Um,
And I
taking
mean, the
advantage of
prices have
overseas.
come way down really the last few
Yeah,
years.
exactly. And then over time, everything else has come down too. But they really set that initial thing. So what's nice about stainless is you're making all kinds of configurations. It lasts forever. It's ultimately cleanable. And harder to break. Nothing's impossible to dent or break, but harder to. So that's kind of your three materials and your shape. Now there's the whole thing I'm calling hybrids, and that might be plastic or glass. And it's the whole concept of, do we have to have it be a conical anymore? Sometimes the brew bucket's a great example of, it's not a conical, it's not a bucket, it's kind of a concave, so you have a place for the yeast to kind of settle out in, a little spigot above it, but
Sure.
not all the expense of a true conical with a tri-clamp fitting underneath it and all of that. So I think those have done a great service for homebrewers. It's kind of the benefits of some things like the materials, but also the benefits of the cost, by not having these other things we might consider features if you're going to harvest yeast like a commercial brewer would or whatnot. But let's face it, most of us homebrewers aren't doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a lot of the innovation of the past few years has been in small tabletop systems, the all-in-one systems, the stainless steel fermenters, small ones. Where do you see home brewing going in the future as far as equipment?
It's smaller. I think, like, still cool ways of doing it. I think these all-in-ones, I've already seen some, like actually Braumeister's been making a little 10-liter one forever. I mean, it's $2,000, so it's not inexpensive. But I think we're going to see some. Exactly. I think we're going to see some of these other ones come in smaller. And I think that's huge because, like, with the electricity, all of a sudden now you can get a roaring boil off 110 easily with a smaller batch. And I think homebrewers are embracing the smaller batch lifestyle for all the reasons we talked about before. And the big one we haven't talked about, and that's a lot of people are drinking less for health reasons, for whatever. We love the taste, but maybe we're not drinking it in the mass consumption we used to. Maybe that's not a horrible thing. I'll get over it. But I think that's where starting to hear at different shows, Brau over in Germany and such, people talking about, oh, have you seen this cute little 1-gallon system this guy made, and look what he did here. And so I think the manufacturers are starting to talk about it more. Your price per gallon isn't going to look as cool, but I think people are okay with that. They just want to have the features that they want.
Well, and I think it also gives you a chance to brew more potentially. If you only have to make
more
2 or 3 gallons at a more, and you're not doing, like I've got a 10-gallon system, but I don't brew on it that often because I don't drink 10 gallons. It takes me quite a while to go through 10 gallons now.
Yeah. No, you need big parties. So.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I want to get your closing thoughts.
Homebrewing is still here. I think a lot of people are like, oh gosh, what's happening? It's everything goes through ups and downs. And I think we're in an age where people like to see things happen fast. They like to see things happen easy. But I think there's always going to be the artisan. There's always going to be the craftsman who loves, how was this made? How can I control these things? If we're starting to see some of these breweries exit the scene, that brings back more people into homebrewing, because now all of a sudden maybe you can't get those flavors that a lot of us, I'm sure you did too. We started brewing because you would read about these styles of beer, but you couldn't taste them anywhere. And in the last few years, you could get almost any beer style you wanted here in a 5-mile radius of your house, probably. But as that ebbs back a little bit, I think the creativity of homebrewing really reminds people how much fun it can be.
Yeah, and it is a great hobby, and I agree with you. I mean, beer's not going anywhere. It's been around for, 4,000 or 5,000 years, so
I think it's the oldest
very likely it'll be around.
Right?
It'll still be around 4,000 or 5,000 years from now, assuming we're still here, right? Anyways, Chris, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Today, my guest, Mr. Chris Graham, president of More Beer and former Brewers Association board member, as well as AHA governing committee member. Chris, thank you again for coming on the show.
Cheers.
A big thank you to Chris Graham for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.